You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.
I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is
The Coop. Today, we're doing The Idol of School.
Ooh.
It seems that when it comes to kids, so much conversation centers around their schooling, including achievements, success, challenges, and interventions. We all seem so concerned about measuring our kids that I have to ask, is our focus on schooling healthy?
Ooh.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
First, Mandy, what's your scoop on the Coop?
Okay. So I just started with this book called The Ology.
Ooh.
And of course, you put the and the ology together, it's theology. But it's written by Marty Machowski, and illustrated by Andy McGuire. And it's Ancient Truths Ever New, like new as in opposite of old.
Yeah.
What I love about it is we're doing ancient history, right? So ancient truths, right? But it basically is teaching doctrine different than catechism. So we've been using catechism for so many years. So it's nice to kind of take a break from that for a little bit, even though I'm going to jump right in when I go to my Charlotte Mason morning time thing. But this is, it has the theology of God, like God always was and always will be. So we did that today. God is 3 in 1. Yesterday we did God created everything out of nothing at all because we started our creation study. God is all powerful. God is in control. Goes into that. Then it goes into the theology or the ology of people. And then the ology of sin, the ology of the promise and the law, the ology of Christ, and on and on. The Holy Spirit, adoption in God's family, change, church, end times, and God's word.
Nice.
And they're done in such bite-sized chunks. It's just like 2 pages. And the art is peaceful and nice. And yeah, so it was, my kids were able to remember at dinner today what today's and yesterday's were.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was really cool that I didn't have to ask them the question. Normally catechism, you ask them a question and then they answer. And this is something that they need to just conjure up on their own. And I really like that. So I'm really excited about this book. And it's like an 8x8 basically.
Yeah,
So easy
nice
to
and
carry
small.
and put in a tote bag and take with you places. And it has a little story to start off on how it's introduced to these 2 kids. They open a cellar door and at a church, and it's down in the cellar, and it's wrapped in brown paper with a bow. And yeah, it's just really cute it made me wish I had looked at that ahead of time and had wrapped it with a bow. And had them discover it and had them be like, what's this? But I didn't even look at it until I went to read it.
I'm often wishing I would pre-read things more.
I know. And we looked at the author a ton. We looked at what church he was a pastor of, or is a pastor of. He writes the story gospel, a different book that we read to our kids that our church had gifted our kindergartners.
Oh, cute.
And so we knew already they had vetted him, but we vetted him some more. But I didn't even think to actually open the book. So anyway.
Well, now I'll do that for my kids.
I know, exactly. So yeah, learning
from your
us.
mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so great, so simple, and it's the real truths I want them to know in a simple way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, we started school last week. By the time this airs, that's probably a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just kind of sneak school back in.
Yeah.
I don't love the fanfare. I wanted to really have my kids think about schooling all year round.
Yeah, education.
Exactly. We didn't finish our California study when the last day of school happened for the other people. And so there was definitely a little bit of like, well, I thought we were done. And I said, well, we're always learning. We're going to keep going until we get to a good stopping point. It doesn't matter. We don't start and stop just because somebody else is, And so I was trying to take away the arbitrariness of centering our learning around specific dates.
Yeah.
But then we did get to a point where we kind of were able to table that and take a break for the summer. And so I just made a point of the learning is different.
Yeah.
Now you're getting more free time to read other books, or we're playing more games together, or we're going on more adventures, or you're going to dance camps, you know, like the learning is just different. And then I wasn't actually even prepared to start. I mean, I was prepared. I wasn't planning to start school when I did. It was just, well, what else are we doing? The weeks are, you know, the busyness of summer for me kind of died down. I was prepared because I had started planning so early. And why not start now?
Yeah.
So I just did. And we gathered at the table and we just did it. And no one asked, well, is this the first day of school? You know, there wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
We just
when
did
you
it.
truly believe, which we all do,
Right?
But when you believe that life is learning, having these what's it called? Something in pompous.
Pomp and circumstance.
Pomp and circumstance to start and end learning.
Right.
It is kind of odd.
Right.
And I do it because I love it and it's so much fun. But it makes sense when you're homeschooling to actually be like, we're learning all the time together.
Right.
My bonding with my kids a lot of time is learning together
Yeah.
or teaching them or experiencing things together. And so I think it makes sense.
Right. And there's reason to celebrate certain things. And I just found this one wasn't one I felt compelled to celebrate.
Totally.
You know, and
Yeah.
so there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I just snuck it right in and we just started our new things. And, you know, the kids were just there. And my little guy was really excited to start because he got his own workbooks this year for Gather Round. He had his own math curriculum.
So he had a little bit of the pomp and circumstance. Like he could tell something had changed.
Yes. He knew he was being incorporated in a different way.
Yeah.
And so he was so excited to do his first math lesson.
Yeah.
We couldn't even just do one. In the last 3 days, we've now done 3 chapters of his Math UC.
Yeah.
But that's fine. It's all him deciding he wanted to do it. And then me getting to a point of saying, now we're going to save that for tomorrow. You know, like to keep some excitement there. So there is excitement just in the fact that we're learning. And I like that. And I don't have back to school rituals. I love seeing them all over
and we
on
do
Instagram.
our first day of school episodes. We have our About Me. And I do all that. And I love it, and that's motivating for me. So
exactly,
it's really great just to keep in mind that you have to do what motivates you and what gets you and your kids excited. And if you can get them excited doing like what a lot of us do with the signs and the new clothes and the new whatever, that's great. And then if you can do it by just living your life, that's great too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's how we started school.
Yeah.
I'm not sure my kids knew what was going on. And then all of a sudden it was come to the table.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
And now it's a routine again, which I like. You know, it's our second week this week and we did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm teaching my kids up until Christmas Eve.
Right.
You know, we're doing, Christmas around the world up until the 24th.
Totally.
But I just don't call it school. It's just, hey, let's have fun together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of calling it school, we want to get into the idea of school becoming an idol in our lives. Mm-hmm. I intentionally used the word school for this discussion rather than education. And while, of course, I think education could become an idol, I want education to be somewhat synonymous with learning in the context of what I'm talking about. Because I think, as we were just saying in my scoop, I think education and learning should be this ongoing thing. I think it is important. I think, most of us value learning and education across, all kinds of different belief systems and value systems. So I think that there's an importance there. We just need to talk about the difference between something becoming an idol and not. But what I think hangs over our heads, even when we're not making it an idol in our lives, is the idea of schooling. Mm-hmm. It's the whole concept of deschooling. And we talk about that in episode, I've got it right here for you, 68. So we talk about deschooling in episode 68. And so it's kind of that concept is we can never really shake it. And so I want to talk about it in its worst form as when it becomes an idol. Mm-hmm. So by school, I really mean the government schooling model of the public school with state standards, standardized testing, academic merit, awards and scholarships, labels of advanced or behind, grading system primarily based on testing. You know, the grading system, we just were talking about this in a different episode, about being graded on content that is maybe not even relevant to the actual learning that you did in that course. You know, the grading is based on something else completely and takes away from what you might have been able to learn and carry with you in a subject area.
Like instead of assessing understanding, it was assessing memorization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So an idol is something we begin to worship, often at the detriment of everything else. As a Christian, whenever we allow one of God's gifts to trump our allegiance to God himself, an idol is born. Idols have come up often in the Bible and in life when evaluating my relationship with God. So I've encountered many idols in my life over
we all
the years.
have.
We
Yes.
all have. But it's important for us to recognize it and to see it for what it is. And
Even family could be an idol.
100%.
Like your own family.
Pastors find that they idolize their job, their role as pastorship. And so, you know, that's a big thing. So Christians are totally guilty of idolatry. But I think that even non-Christians and Christians alike, we're no strangers to the reality of how easy it is to allow something to run our lives. How often do we look at our children's education in terms of, I'm going to use air quotes here, schooling? Where are they in academic achievement? How do they measure up to their peers? I feel like we often take pride in their accomplishments, something that you can compare with somebody else. Oh, well, my kid's reading at a 10th grade level.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're measuring it.
Yeah.
And then you have prideful feelings about that.
Yeah. Or you're like excited to see what the assessment shows when you don't even believe in the assessment itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We still can't shake it.
Yeah.
So even though it may not really truly be an idol in our lives, it's still there.
Yeah.
Or feeling guilt or shame in your child's shortcomings, feeling like you are somehow responsible.
Totally.
So we'll dive into more of those things in a moment. But what if we were to take away schooling as the measuring stick and consider each child's individual educational growth? Do we still feel all of those negative feelings? Do we feel pride in what they're learning? Maybe we just feel proud that they are on their own journey. Or maybe you have a kid who loves to dive deep into very specific things. You might have a kid who's an amazing coder, but isn't a strong reader.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can look at that and just be proud that they were able to find that. So being proud of your kid isn't a negative thing in and of itself. Right. However, can we look objectively at our child's individual learning or educational growth and be satisfied with that on its own without comparing? I think coming from public schools and having earned college degrees, it can be very difficult to view education separately from learning or from schooling, rather.
Right.
So it can be difficult to view education separately from schooling, which is what I'm trying to do here, is just caution myself, because I get caught up in this all the time.
Totally.
I forget that learning is learning and something that I want to teach my kids how to do rather than school them. And so that leaves me here with one of Mark Twain's great quotes for us homeschoolers. I have never let schooling interfere with my education. And he's not the only one to have
It's
a
like
quote
something
similar to
Gatto
that.
would say.
Exactly.
John Taylor Gatto. That's
Exactly.
I mean,
Einstein has said something similar.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of this idea that these very bright people who were a gift in their own way to their own subject areas, environmentalism for Mark Twain, you know, science and math for Einstein, you know, they were very gifted and talented.
Was he a physicist?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I probably should have researched that better. But I don't know everything.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
But my point being, they've all said to some extent that schooling actually hindered so much of their learning because they were forced into doing things that they were either not interested in or that were completely arbitrary
Well, they're
versus
bombarded with information.
exactly. And Mark Twain lived a long time ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So I was thinking maybe we need to figure out how to determine if school is an idol. So I have 4 questions for us. Are we willing to compromise our beliefs or values for the academic achievement of our child?
I think I'm willing to compromise them to get the budget that the charter school gives me.
There's certain things that you
you're
might be willing to.
because I get upwards to $9,000.
Right.
And being a single income, I love using that for music lessons and gymnastics and field trips and some of the books we use in the secular
The
curriculum.
supplements, the boxes. Yeah.
So then I am more willing to compromise my values and beliefs a little bit in order to make the other things happen that I truly value. So it's finding that balance sometimes.
Absolutely. And, that's slightly a different part of it, you know what I mean? But I think that a lot of times we want our children to achieve certain academic goals so much that we start to compromise what we truly believe. If you believe they're on their own learning curve, then what does it matter what they score on that test over there?
Yeah.
But we definitely start to really think about that. And
Or how fast they get through a curriculum.
Right.
How fast they get through their math book.
Right.
If you've talked about it being like a sound engineering board. Like sometimes you might move that switch up really quickly.
Right.
Or slide it up really quickly, and others might just slide very slowly.
Exactly.
So why push the one that needs to slide slowly so fast when it's going to get there?
Right. A mixer doesn't look like everything all in the same
Right.
place. You
Yeah.
know, we all are at different levels, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And we're at different levels in different arenas. The next question is, do you get angry if your child doesn't meet your expectations or maybe falls behind state standards?
So what's really sad is I'm an aggressive talker. And so people often think that I'm yelling at them
Yeah.
and fighting with them when I'm not.
Sure.
And my kids fall victim to that as well. And so I think from their perspective,
Right.
I get angry.
Right.
And I do get frustrated though. I do get annoyed or
Sure.
irritated. And when they start to flail their hands around and feet around, I do tend to then mirror that instead of being the more, not with flailing.
Sure. You match the level.
The
of
level of
energy and-
emotion.
yeah.
And I'm worked up now. And so
Right.
then my kid who is no part of this, and he's sitting over there and he was like, "Mommy, your tone." And I'm like, "Well, I'm frustrated. This
Right.
is
It's ridiculous.
yeah.
Yeah, it is really hard. I struggle in my own ways with that as well, and making sure that my expectations are known to my kids to help with that, I think is helpful. But I didn't know I needed to communicate that until they think that they're disappointing me in some way, But what's good is you aren't the one who has an expectation of them necessarily. Or when you're feeling frustrated, it's more having to do with their behavior, their work ethic, and other things that we do value a lot more than. So I'm parenthood.
I know.
It's not for the faint of heart. Okay, question 3. Do you value your child's schooling over people? So this one can be, you can interpret this a few different ways, but this is just in general. And I've customized these questions away from a more generic, do you have an idol problem, to specifically schooling.
Yeah.
But is it more important for your child to get through schooling or get through some type of study than it is to have relationship? Or do you care more about what schooling should look like, that you don't befriend certain people based on their own school choices?
Or you don't go to Nana and Papa's for the weekend. I have almost annually changed our first day of school or first week of school based upon someone saying, "Hey, let's go see this movie at El Capitan and stay in a hotel." I'm like, looks like we're starting school a week later, or my parents want to have us for 3 days, or
Isn't it your mom's birthday right around now?
my dad's.
Or your dad's.
And my daughter's. And we wanted to go camping. So I was like, okay, well, it's not going to look the way I want it to look, but oh well, because I'd rather
it's
go
not
camping.
more important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and then you want to balance that with, I will go weeks without doing any academic work because we're doing stuff with people every day.
Right.
So it's trying to find that balance, right?
Definitely. And we'll get to that. We have some helpful tools for you.
Oh.
Mandy doesn't know. I planned this episode. She's like, oh, we
That's
do?
fun. Let me jump in when I want.
wait.
Yeah.
But we do have some helpful tools that'll help with those kinds
Yeah.
of things. So the fourth question here is, does schooling your child pull you closer to God? Or if you don't have a relationship with God, the things that you value, such as family or relationships or character, whatever it is that's important to you. Does schooling pull your child closer or farther away?
And you would know that if you have a mission, right? So if you filled out our mission thing, that might come later.
That is the tool, Mandy.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's when you forget your values and you forget why you're doing this, it just is all in vain, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that that's really important. If you feel like the schooling has become what's most important and you're not doing these other things in your life, you're not valuing things that you actually really deep down inside want to value, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And so perhaps you've made school a god of its own. So those are the questions that you can ask yourself if you're wondering whether school has become an idol for you. But what happens when we let school become an idol? I think this is the big question. And this comes out in multiple ways. One of them being dissatisfaction. Nothing is ever going to be enough. You might have that 4.0 or your kid might have that 4.0, but are they doing enough? Are they going to get into the college? Are they going to get the scholarship? Are they going to look the best? Are they beating Susie around the corner? There's a lot of dissatisfaction when you put all of your value in school and all of your measuring in schooling. And so dissatisfaction is a big one. The next one would be sacrifice. What are you giving up to make schooling this important? Are you not going to church? Are you not seeing Nana and Pop-Pop? Are you not making friends? Are you not doing your piano lessons?
Or are you doing too much?
Right.
You're doing too many of these things where you don't even get to be home or you don't get to be with your kids in a fun way.
Exactly. So sacrifice can look different in what you are valuing in your life or in what ways you're doing it. But are you sacrificing the wrong things in order to achieve schooling in whatever way that looks like to you? Worry is such a big one, especially as parents. I think we often are just worried about whether we're doing the right things or not. And that's hard enough and something that we really should be giving up and not worrying about. But if we're worrying about our children's schooling and grades and test scores and how they compare to their peers, perhaps that really has become an idol in our lives. That shouldn't be something that we worry about. We need to really rethink how we view education and learning and maybe take away the schooling aspect of it. And then finally, identity. Oftentimes you hear lots of different ways of this conversation happening about losing your identity or an identity crisis. And so do your children's grades determine your worth and value? And for a lot of people who idolize school, definitely.
I know. It actually hurts when I see people post on their Instagram like, oh, look at what the teacher said about my kid. Look at the grades they got. And it's one thing to be really proud of a lifelong career of perseverance and endurance and working hard. But when it's the constant, he got student of the week and over again, I don't know. It a lot of times rubs me the wrong way.
Right. It doesn't match with your personal value system. And so you see people valuing these things that to us don't line up. And I mean, I fall victim to that as well. I'll get a note from my daughter's piano teacher and just saying like, she's proud of this and that. And I'm like, oh, and you want to
Yeah.
share it. And then
Yeah.
I'm thinking, why would I share that?
Yeah.
The only person I should be telling is my daughter.
Yeah.
And I should be telling her that I'm proud of her for these reasons, not
Right.
because of the accomplishment,
Right.
but because of the work that she put into it, because
Right.
of her, perseverance through it being difficult sometimes, or her sacrifice because she likes this thing, not because she's doing,
What
she's
you want
made
her
it
to
most
do.
important
Yeah.
or whatever it is. But, I think it's important to figure out where your identity is, where your kid's identity is, and whether or not your schooling is pulling on that. So what can we do when school becomes an idol? Whether it's really, truly a big, fat idol that you're worshiping in your life, or whether schooling just still lives up here, trying to whisper in your ear. What can we do? The first thing I said was evaluate your educational goals and philosophies. What is the purpose of education? Answer that for yourself. You know what ours is. You guys have been listening long enough. You know what we believe the purpose of education is. We want our kids to be able to go on being lifelong learners. We want them to decide what careers they might have in the future, what life goals they might have, how they might serve God. And we think their education should help them get to that point to make a decision for themselves.
And bring them joy.
Absolutely. How does schooling and academics help my child achieve an education? So if schooling is going to help you get to that point for your kids to reach your end goal, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with teaching and
Right.
schooling, but it's doing it outside of the point of an education. It's doing it for the sake of the schooling versus doing it for the sake of this lifelong learning.
Well, it's like the life lens that we've spoken
Right.
about in other episodes. Like they learn to read so they can, we would say, read God's word
Right.
and enjoy literature.
Exactly.
They learn math so they can understand the complexities of the world in a deeper way and find joy in that, and they learn history because then they can learn the story of humanity and how
Right.
God has saved it, redeemed us.
Right.
And so having that life lens really helps you see, like, so then does this really matter? Does this play a role in that?
Right. Absolutely. And if we get caught up in schooling and making things arbitrary and out of context, how do they feel about that?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So episode 68, I mentioned before, is our deschooling episode. And in that one, we really dive into what schooling has done to us and how we can really step back and rethink education and apply that to our homeschooling. Another thing that we can do to fight the school idol is reassess our values and where schooling fits into them. I referenced a couple more episodes we did, which is the balance of exposure in episode 36 and educational gaps, episode 40. Nothing is going to be perfect. No one way to pursue an education or a learning path is going to be perfect.
And if you're feeling pressure from your teacher, if you're part of a charter school, homeschool charter school, and you're feeling pressure from your teacher, the one you check in with, that you're not hitting all the I can statements or the state standards or whatever, I would encourage them to listen to episode 40, educational gaps, so they can get a proper understanding of why it doesn't matter. Right. And why there needs to be some workaround. There's some flexibility.
Everything is going to have gaps. The government schooling has gaps. The homeschooling is going to have gaps. And it's freeing to know that and to decide on what you personally value and how you can help your schooling fit into that. We talk about finding your identity. So this is another one related to that. It's really easy to lose our identity and find our value in what people think of us as a homeschooling mom and how our kids are achieving. And that's a big one. As a believer in God, my identity is in Him alone.
And that's what we want our children's identity to be in.
Absolutely. My worth comes from what He thinks of me, not anybody else. And what He thinks of me shapes my relationships with others. It shapes my decisions and my identity and the way that other people know me. And
Yeah.
I hope that that brings value to them, the people in my life as well. But if it doesn't, my biggest question is, am I honoring God?
Yeah.
Because that's my value system.
Yeah.
That's where I look to figure out that question.
Yeah.
You know, to ask myself, am I making something more important? More important than what? Than God.
Yeah, I love it.
That's my measuring stick. And then create a homeschooling mission statement. Like Mandy said, this is a big one. And we provide a tool for you.
Yeah.
In step 1 of our Homeschool Starter Pack, Volume 1, we have a whole system for you to go through to figure out how to find your personal mission statement for homeschooling.
Yeah.
Businesses have mission statements. Organizations have mission statements. Why not have a mission statement to help you guide your path?
You know, when we were pregnant with our first kid, our pastor came over to our house to do a visit, see how we were doing, you know, separate from church, and just to offer support and prayer and wisdom. He had 6 children and had been a lawyer and was headmaster of a classical academy and also our pastor. And so he had a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. And he was like, you know what? The only advice I really give to you is to be intentional about your parenting.
Right.
And he said, you know, we're intentional. He's like, you know, he said to Marcus, he was getting his PhD at the time. And he's like, think of how intentional you are about learning history. He's like, be that way in parenting your child. Be intentional.
Right.
And I think having the mission statement for your homeschooling is doing that. It's being intentional.
Absolutely. And it lends itself to this next part, the check-in. Check in often. Put it in your calendar if you
good
have
idea.
to. Check
Yeah.
in quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever works for you. Put in a check-in point, and then ask yourselves those 4 questions from earlier about whether schooling has become an idol for you. Refer back to your mission statement. Are you living your mission statement? Are the things that you're doing right now a part of your value system? Are you doing anything that's making you question your homeschooling path? And if so, perhaps you need a reset. Perhaps schooling became too important.
And we talk about that in episode 80, Homeschooling Success. And, you know, if part of my mission is to have bonding fun, that's usually where I find the most satisfaction in the experiences that we're having.
Right.
And that's how I know I've been successful, is because after an experience, or after you do this unit study, or after you introduce a new subscription box, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you sit back when the kids walk away to go do whatever they're going to do, and just be like, was that, for example, bonding and fun? Was that bonding and fun? You know, it's so simple. You know, I have a much more complicated mission statement, but bonding and fun is a big part of it.
Definitely.
And so it's like, was that bonding and fun?
Yeah.
And then you can feel satisfaction in that, and know that you didn't let certain things get in the way. You know, you didn't let the fact that they weren't holding their pencil right get in the way of the bonding and fun that you want to have through this curriculum or this subscription box or whatever it was.
Yes, I agree. So if you're worried about having an idol of school, now got those tools to make that assessment.
I love it. That's good.
And now it's time for the Coop Q A, where we answer your questions. The question of the day is, how do I know if I'm covering a topic thoroughly?
Yeah, I think that's so hard to really gauge or measure, because you could dive as deep as you want to dive into so many things, right? And deep dives are important to develop real understanding and interest. But I'll use the dinosaur, for example. So when my older 2 were younger, we were going to the Grand Canyon. So what is this, like 3 or 4 years ago? And so I was so excited. I don't even like dinosaurs. So, but I'm like, okay, this is the moment. So I got the Dr. Seuss dinosaur book. I got dinosaur games. I got the Forbidden Desert, which we haven't even played. I got pop-up books. I got dinosaur reference books. it was so many. It was like half my dining room table covered in this stuff. But it was going to be, and then we did the dinosaur eggs like that you smash open or whatever it is. And I think we spent like 2 or 3 days and they were like, meh. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're done with dinosaurs. Yeah. I didn't need to overdo it. I had just gotten really into the unit study idea.
Sure.
But I wasn't interested, and that probably got communicated, but they weren't interested. And only just the other day, my older daughter was like, well, if I can't become a veterinarian, I think I want to become an archaeologist. And I was like, what?
Right. Well, we got some stuff to cover.
I was like, okay, well, we're talking about Indiana Jones a little bit. She's like, not that kind, dinosaur kind. And I'm like, really? Okay.
So funny.
You've never shown any interest in it, but hey, at least I know it's a possibility, right?
Right.
But yeah, so we didn't cover the topic thoroughly. They probably can't even name us any dinosaur, maybe a T-Rex, and that's it.
That's so funny.
And it's because they see the T-Rex when we would do Disney all the time.
Right.
And we would go through the largest diorama of the world on the Disney train ride. And the T-Rex was there fighting with his little hands flopping around, you know.
Funny.
I know.
He's the king of dinosaurs.
Yeah, but that's it. So anyway, long story short, you just dive in as deep as your kids want to go, and then you move on.
I agree. I think that you can do all the research and prep work in the world, and there will still be a resource you missed and you didn't look at that might share one more fact that you didn't have.
Yeah.
You know, you're just not going to cover everything. So when you say thoroughly, you just have to understand that thorough is as much as you can, as much as makes sense, as much as there's an interest. You know, I mean,
without bombarding them with so many facts and books and everything where they're just like, I'm sick of this already.
Right. I think it really comes down to if they do want a career in archaeology out of the blue, they're going to learn it.
Yeah.
They're going to fill in what they didn't have. And we talk a lot about this in our episode on educational gaps, which is episode 40. And we talk about there's just gaps everywhere you go, you know, and this is no exception. You're not going to cover everything. So don't even try. Don't make that a worry of yours. Enjoy studying something and find what's interesting and go as far as it makes sense to go.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.